Hello, thank you everyone for checking out my video. This is one of my first tutorials and figure I might as well start it right from the start and go to the end. I always begin by making most of my beads that I'll need for all my joints and other articulated points. These bars I use are actually tattoo needle bars. I stripped the needles off the end. They're made out of stainless steel and the polymer clay does not stick to them. When I'm making my beads, this actually ensures that I have a hole going through the center that is aligned properly. It also lets me make other beads if I have to replace one or I need a different color, and I know that they're going to be the same size. I've produced a bunch of different molds to standardize it, and they were inexpensive and cheap to make. They save so much time and energy with the making of the beads, and I found hand rolling them just doesn't get them round enough for the joints so that they move smoothly. In the future I'm going to make a video about how I make these molds. I don't just use them for the round beads, I use them for the double knee and the double elbow beads. Once you get a bunch of them together, then you have to trim them. It takes a while, one of the longest parts, so I fast forward through a bunch of it. End up making anywhere from 14 to 20 beads per doll, so yeah, anywhere I can save some time is just great. The mold I haven't made yet is for like a bean for my necks. It's not a double bead with like an elbow or a knee, but they're easy to make. I just trim a little bit on each end. I leave them on the bar because it keeps them from rolling around and lets me get a straight down chop. Then put them together and ta-da, not quite two round ends. This is Sculpty Bacon Bond. With polymer clay, this stuff is like crazy glue. Stick it together like you would white, and then when you bake it actually bonds the two into one piece. It's an amazing product. If you're getting into this, this is definitely one of the things I'd most recommend, especially if you're going to be putting pieces on top of pieces on top of pieces. It ensures that each bake it's like baking onto soft. Making the neck beads is almost exactly like making a double jointed elbow or a double jointed knee. You just don't do the trimming. Just put them butt to butt, and then where your elbow or your knee would be, a little bit of the bacon bond, and put your shape already on there. But if you're interested in that, I'll definitely make some more videos on how to make beads and all the joint related articulation points. Another thing I do is I just started making skulls. The skulls are actually for the inside of the head, for the core. This way I know dimensions, eyes, everything just stays centered and it's becoming a lot easier. There was another method I used to use, but it was kind of haphazard. Plus with the skulls, it lets me concentrate on just getting better with doing the faces and not trying to make the skull each time. Using the same underskull each time has made it so that my faces have actually become more realistic with each doll I produce. I have a little mold for making the clear eyes to go in them. These are just random beads that I've made from other projects that didn't get used, and I use them for when I'm making the ball joints and stuff. When I'm setting up where the cavity in a hip or in an elbow or a shoulder or a neck, I like to wrap the beads and then actually use one of my formed beads that I know I can make again and again. It just makes it so that I get a true socket, especially for the beads that I produce. Wrapping them in tin foil like this ensures that the polymer clay doesn't bake to the already baked polymer clay. It also makes it easier at removal time. I don't waste any of the tinfoil. I actually put it all in a little bag, and when I need core for something I'm going to make out of tinfoil for a form, I just put a bunch of this stuff in, so I don't even really waste any. When I'm doing my bodies, I'll always make a inner core for the upper torso and the lower hips. It gives me somewhere to start from. Most times my torso will have 2 or 3 bakes on top of each other. First a core, then I do a forming, and then I do a final over with all the little details. This technique actually helps me keep everything centered and squared and not having like droopy shoulders or a hip that's misaligned. It just helps me make everything a lot more squared and natural looking. I like to use thinner layers on top of thinner layers. I find when I use a thick layer, I can get too much cracking, or it doesn't bake all the way through, and I have a tendency to have to drill stuff out. And if I do that with unbaked clay that isn't cured fully, it can be awful crumbly. But if it's fully cured, I have no problem drilling it and it stays together, and the tensile strength of this Sculpey Primo has been one of the key factors in letting me make these dolls like I do. A bunch of the other polymer clays, as soon as they go under pressure with that hole in the center, parts can just explode and crumble. And here's the drilling out. I always start with an itty bitty thin drill bit, and then I keep working up to the next bigger, next bigger, next bigger. This little pointed bit actually helps me expand the very tip of the hole, so each new size of drill bit doesn't try to skate around, it just goes drilling straight in. Most times I'll have to drill up about 4 different sizes, 2 from the bar to get to a really good size. I like to make sure they're a little on the snug side, but not enough that you have to force them through the hole. Doing this can actually crack the piece that you just made and drill the hole in. It always looks funny when I first put my 2 pieces together, because I'm like, oh, the proportions, this doesn't look right. But then I have to remind myself, this is the inside core that nobody ever sees. This is the basis for everything to go on top of. See, lots and lots of drill bit. But once it's all set and square, I can put the bars in, and then it'll give me what will actually start looking like a figure. From this point, they've been baked. Now I can put another thin layer on, again starting with my Sculpey Bacon Bond. This stuff is amazing. Goes on like white glue. I even glue wood pieces together with it that I know are going to go in and out of the oven, and I want them to be oven safe. I'll glue popsicle sticks together with it. It actually works really good as an adhesive. Again, non-toxic, go in your oven. Once I get a good second layer on there and it's starting to look like the body I actually want, this is when I see that the sizes are pretty good. With the Primo, it'll get hard pretty quick, so you'll see me constantly rolling it or just touching it a lot. You'd be surprised how much just some hand heat makes it so much more pliable. We're going to thicken up some of the body parts now, get them closer to the shape I actually want them and the thickness I want them. Anywhere where I actually have a socket, I like to actually put the clay in there so that the bead will squish into it, giving it a good socket. if you kind of meet them to it and try to squish it in underneath it, you get these crackings. And then as the bead starts moving around, it pulls on those cracks, and sometimes you can have a fragment pop out. This is one of the reasons why I always squish it into a flat piece. You'll see me actually stab it onto the pole, run it down into the socket hole, and push it in and shape it with the bead. Shaping it with the beads that you're going to use is always better because it gives you a truer form to the beads that are going to rotate in the socket. But already the values and proportions are already starting to look better with each layer I put on. This torso process is how I start almost every doll I build. I could start with legs, I could start with the head, but even when drawing and doing other art projects, I always have a tendency to start with the body. It just sets the tone for me. I know roughly how big my head's going to be, so scaling is never much of a problem. I also usually leave a couple dolls out and about. You can't see them here, but every once in a while I'll put a part up and compare this arm that I'm building to an arm I've already built, and it helps me keep in my 6-inch scale. I don't want my dolls to get too big because, well, I'm planning on making a bunch of these tutorials, and once you get 50-60 of them, they start taking up some space. I've only got 5 of these little 6-inchers already, and they're already starting to clutter things up. Here you can see me using all sorts of hand heat, making sure that I keep that clay warm and squishing in where it needs to go. And then I'll go in and shape it once it cools just a little bit. The Primo, I find, doesn't like to take a lot of really fine details. If you squeeze it in while it's warm as it's cooling, some of the details can actually lift or pop out, and you'll find yourself putting them back in. With the Primo, because it's kind of a little on the plasticky side, I find going over and doing some of my details just before baking helps ensure the crispness that I want left in them. This is one of the products I don't find my fingerprints really stay in it. And if you set it aside while it cools from being warm to the touch, I find fingerprints almost disappear fully, and it takes very little work to actually get them out. I got most of her form now, so now we're just going to work into the upper chest parts, just so that when I make the armor, I want people to know it's a female object. I have a tendency to make a lot of female dolls. I do make some male, but for the most part, I like girls, so I make girls. But again, you got to make sure you get this stuff warmed right up before it gets really pliable and soft. Once it cools down, it's hard to blend it in, regardless if it's already baked like it is here, or if it's on other soft. It's not one that really likes to blend all that great. It takes a little work. You'll find yourself smoothing and using the silicone tools a lot to make sure that those seams disappear. With the softer sculpties, I've played with the Sculpty 3 before, and it's a lot easier to get the seams to join. Like, this is probably 5 times harder to get it to join. But for the durability, like this character I'm building now, I've dropped it dozens of times since I've made it, and I have yet to have a piece break off. Like, I can't say enough about the Sculpted Primo. It is very durable. And I don't order any of my polymer clay online. I go right to a store. Most of the time, Michael's is fairly close to me, so I'll go there. I prefer to make sure I get it juicy. I would rather open up a pack of polymer clay and it actually need to be leached off a little bit versus being dry and have to add a softener to it. It's just a personal preference, and I find going into the store and actually squeezing the clay I'm going to buy has made a world of difference in how well my projects actually turn out without mishaps or bad bakes or just crumbly clay. You'll notice I don't use a lot of tools. I got a little bit of a selection, but I didn't spend a lot. I bought a bunch of cheap ones offline when I first started, and they were actually so good that I got the same set for my daughter. I didn't want her using mine all the time. But you don't need a lot of money for this. I call it basic ball joint builds because it is pretty basic. I don't have a lot of money wrapped up in building these. Most times you can build a doll for about $12. A lot of my stuff, other than the clay, comes from the dollar store or offline. I think in all my tools I might have $25 in tools. I have, probably another $25 in miscellaneous things that I use, like little scissors, this cutting tile, and a lot of it comes from like a dollar store type thing. The hands, I make them a mitt type shape. That mitt type shape is because I really don't keep the fingers on this hand. I end up cutting them off close to the thumb. The reason is because I'll build fingers. And these fingers are actually the way I join my hands and string my strings and keep the tension. The other reason I do the fingers is I like an opening and closing hand. It makes it easier for putting accessories and stuff in, and as you'll find out, I'm all about accessories for these figures too. It's not just build a doll, I build an action figure. They have accessories, armors, helmets, the whole bit. Some of them even have vehicles. Again, warming up that clay, always warming it up. Never using it cold if you don't have to. Once it's rolled out, that's a different story, and you're using thin pieces. But as a hunk, I never ever use it cold. Here I'm going to make some of those fingers I'm talking about. One of the things I use for the fingers is I use sewing needles, the push pins with the steel backer. You'll see me use these for causing the gape in the fingers so that there's a hole for that pin to ride through. I find it with the hands, they're so thin that I got small drill bits, but even then I don't want to have to try and drill this hole out. And I found just forming it over the pin gives me the hole that I'm going to need for the pin, that very pin, to slide in and out of. I end up cutting it off, and I'll leave the head on it. If you cut the head off it, you can slide the pin in, and it'll almost disappear. But it's kind of like a signature thing for me, so I just leave them. I don't get too complicated when I'm sculpting any of my dolls. The hands here, you're seeing me sculpt my hands pretty much, I think they're about 4 times faster than I would normally real one-to-one be doing it. But the process is exactly the same. My dolls, I build them quick. I can build a doll in a weekend. Most times they'll take me about 2 weeks, sometimes 3. Depends on how many arms or if they got tails or some weird stuff I've decided to add to a doll. But most times I can do it in about 2 weeks. So I haven't really gotten into hyper detail. I am more about cartoon detail. I haven't been building these dolls all too long. I think this is going on just over 2 years and just over a year with polymer clay. So I'm by far not an expert. But it seems like I have a bit of a knack for it. And I want to share that with people. Show them that it is not that hard to make these ball joint dolls. Best thing is, Sorry about that, just got distracted for a second. But the best thing is, polymer clay is very, very forgiving. If you don't like something, just carve it off after. Sand it flat, add another piece again. Something breaks, I just make it again. It's actually pretty fun to play with. It makes me feel like a kid half the time. Probably why I make action figures. Another thing is going into crazy detail. Once you get all the parts together as a whole, all the little details kind of hide. So at the start, just concentrate on those major details. It's like drawing a cartoon or a caricature. So much of the stuff your brain will actually put in. One of the key things, if you're just new to it and you're rolling and everything starts sticking, keep wiping stuff down. A couple paper towels close by and polishing up rollers and boards keeps a lot of things from sticking. Now, to keep my leg joints at certain distances, I'll glue a little bit of this and make a tube around one of these steel bars. Once it's baked, more bacon bond, even the bacon bond won't stick to the stainless steel. It will still slide off after, but it will help the clay stick while I'm turning it into a tube. Without something like the bacon bond, you start squishing and you try to get to this tube shape, and the hole in the middle will start to elongate. And then you don't really get this tube that you're looking for. The tube is actually pretty important for me when I'm doing legs or bigger arms on slightly bigger dolls. I've made a few bigger ones, 9-inch rainbow high style, and these tubes make it indispensable for making sure that I keep all the spacing on my legs right, so that my thighs are both the same length, that my calves are both the same length. Thinner arms, I don't worry about the tubes so much because the arms are almost as big around as the tubes after. And I end up drilling a bunch of this out. I like the polymer clay because it actually cuts pretty easy. I just keep going around, just scoring it lightly, and eventually it'll cut through. Don't try to force cut it or use a lot of pressure because it'll just shatter. Just spin it around, kind of like if you're using a tube cutter for copper tubing. Slide that tube on, and bam! I do this 3 more times, and my legs will all have equal spacing. I know you're not supposed to use equal length thighs to calves, but for my dolls it actually works out better if I do. They can actually do a kneeling pose and things better. If I try to do them in actual figure ratio, when they go to try and do like a kneeling pose, they look odd. They don't look right. I find if you put the bacon bond on for a little bit and let it kind of dry before I try to wrap anything around it, it'll stick a lot better than if it's super gooey wet. But don't wait till it's completely dry, just kind of gooey and tacky. Funny thing about the bacon bond, when you put it on the wet onto the dry with that little bit of glue in there, if you let it sit overnight and go back and try to peel that wet off the baked, you will destroy the wet stuff. It actually starts almost melding into each other even before it gets baked. So having it sit for an hour or so before you put it in the oven afterwards, the tensile strength increases dramatically. I could go straight to just building the leg with the Stormtrooper armor on the outside, but it would be awful thick. It would take a long time to bake, and the outside would be more cured than the inside. So I will build up a basic muscular structure underneath where the armor would be. This gives me my lighter bake on top of a lighter bake on top of a finished bake. Whenever I do this, I never have a problem with cracking. Everything's baked fully through and cured properly if I do it this way. I've tried rushing it before and go straight to the thick thigh, and guess what? It cracks. Almost 100% of the time. Just because of the thickness of the clay, the inside drying out while the outside's already cured. Keeping it warm, patting it in, getting that final shape, and then I'll bake. Now we're going to get into some of the more detailed parts of the leg to make it look more like a natural type of leg with the muscles and stuff. If I do this, my proportions will stay truer. Constantly putting them side by side, making sure that they're looking reasonably even. I don't want to have to try and cut or sand them even after they're all done. Not when you can do it so easily just by tapping and forming. When I do the arms, they didn't have those little sleeves. But when I drill out the beads to go on these bars, or when I form them on the bars, they have a tendency to stay pretty tight. And I can use that bacon bond inside the bead to hold it in place for these ones without the collars or the tubes on them. You don't want to press too hard because they will pop free, but it'll keep them fairly stiff there. A little bit of masking tape on the ends just helps keep those end balls from pushing out anywhere. Here we're going to end up doing the outside armor piece now that these have been baked. Now, the clay is probably a little less than a 1/4 inch, maybe about 3 millimeters. More bacon bond. I've used up a bottle of this in the year so far that I've started this. I really do love the product. Again, forming, keeping it warm, but I don't want it to deform or get too thin. So I'm not using a lot of pressure. I'm just letting the heat of my hand roll this and shape it with very little pressing. It's just tapping, just so lightly. A lot of people use even aluminum foil inside this thigh at this size for keeping it light and stuff. But I found that because my dolls are only 6 inches tall, they really don't get that heavy. I don't see a big weight difference. So the only thing I'm saving is polymer clay. And for how much one of these dolls cost, I'm not too worried about it. Even if I go in and I buy 3 small packs, that's about what it takes to build one of these dolls. I'm still only looking at about $15 for all the material. And I'll still have little odd colors left. Some colors like black, white, translucent. I use the translucent in the Sculpty 3. When I mix it with the translucent Sculpty Primo, the Primo is stiffer and harder, and the 3 is a lot gooier. I find mixing the two together in a 50-50 to 2/3 3 to 1/3 Primo gives me something that's very, very soft but retains strength afterwards. gives me the best of both worlds. Don't be afraid to experiment by combining different polymer clays. I get lots of different colors and textures and swirls and stuff by not mixing in colors fully through. You get a wicked wood grain with just 3 types of brown lightly mixed into each other. But we're playing with white, and the secret with white, keep everything clean. I've washed my hands between lots of different things here, constantly wiping down my board that I work on. The white will pick up every little nugget of hair, dust, old polymer clay that may be in the cracks of your tile. If there is any, when you're using white, this is when you'll find it. So the secret to white is just keep everything clean. Everything clean. Having all these armor bits on it, oh, this is when I start getting excited because you can actually visualize your arm finishing up. See? Already starting to look like armored arms and legs. Now, this is the real fun part. I get to pull off all the parts and sand them. Sanding and drilling, oh my god. You'd think playing with clay wouldn't involve either of these, but you'd be surprised how often you're sanding. But sometimes that's the only way to get things the way you want. Not only do you sculpt, but you also have to shape and carve stuff after you're sculpting so that you can put more on that sanded. You'll see what I mean here when I go to do the ribbing on the Stormtrooper armor for the legs and the arms. If it wasn't smooth before I did that, you couldn't get it smooth after I put the ribbings on. Ta-da! Sanded, smooth. Now, I could pull the foils off, but I'm not going to. I'll leave them on till everything is pretty much done. These will be the little ribs that are on that iconic Stormtrooper outfit. Don't know why they're there in real life, but they make the armors look cooler and distinct. So here I'm going to put thin little lines on top of them. This bacon bond makes sure that these tiny little pieces will stay there permanently. I have dropped, like I said, this doll numerous times, like over a dozen times, and none of these little pieces have ever popped off. And I swear by the bacon bond, that's what kept them there. Patting them down, trying to keep them squared looking. I didn't want to round out any of the edges. Once we get both the arms and the legs all done up, then I can bake it again. Now, I never started with this little steel blade. I actually got it just before I started making this Stormtrooper, and it's been indispensable. The little black-handled razor blade, I've done everything with it, and I'm still on this first razor blade in that thing from when I got it a decade ago. I use a sharpener. And this other steel blade has been just cool. It helps me lift pieces, get straight across cuts without just freehand cutting. You can do arcs and stuff. I haven't experimented much by bending the blade and cutting arcs. I do like it just as straight as it is. When I first made this video, I thought it may have been too long, but I was looking around online, I couldn't find any that were comprehensive, start to finish. 20 minutes for a leg, another half hour for a body, another 10 minutes on how to string them. Nothing was completed. Everybody's broken them all down. So I want my tutorials to be a full video, a full build, start to finish, with some chapters so that people can actually just start and do it. Follow along. If they need a different idea, they can go to it. Almost like a how-to for novices. And I tell you, once you start building them, they are addictive. I absolutely love the ball joint. The whole community is actually just amazing. Even when I was starting out, I had no problems getting anybody to explain stuff that they were doing. It's just, I can't grasp why so many other groups aren't like the ball joint community. It's just absolutely helpful. Nobody puts anybody down, never any bad words. It's been one of the coolest things. Each of the legs on a Stormtrooper, one knee has like a pad, the other one has like these little ammo bags, whatever they are, like little cases. So I made sure that each knee was the way it was supposed to be. Thank God the arms didn't have separate details. But even these little pieces, since I've dropped it a couple times, none of them have ever broke off either. It's amazing how durable these things are. This could be that knee that has that guard, that shin knee pad that comes up. Now these little scissors, I use them for nothing but cutting polymer clay. They are actually in my clay kit. It keeps them sharp, keeps them clean, and because I'm using white, I cleaned them before I used them. One of the good things about working on a bar is it gives you somewhere to hold that isn't polymer clay. I don't get fingerprints or oils working into stuff, which when you deal with white, you work with it too much and you put it in the bake, the oils on your fingers will actually discolor it. This is my favorite part. I take off all the aluminum foil and I get to see all the parts, how they would be on the figure when I'm putting them together. This is when I get to test fit everything, check out range of motion, see if there's anywhere that needs to be sanded, and once I'm done fitting them together like this, they are ready to be strung together. All this foil will go in a bag, and when I'm doing something where I need filler for inside, I'll put it inside and wrap up the aluminum foil around it so I don't have to waste it. But you can already see, like, those are the Stormtrooper legs, the Stormtrooper arms. The parts are starting to become finished looking. Now we're going to need to build those plates. The Stormtrooper has the two plates on the front and the back on their waist, and when I'm building these, I got to make sure that I put them on in such a way that they're not going to hinder the armored legs from their rotations, because if I put it right up to the edge, it'll eat up all the ball joint space. Now the secret with a ball joint doll is there needs to be space to move into. If everything's super tight, then all it can do is turn. It won't be able to rotate on a full ball axis. Plus, I wanted to make sure that some of the black behind the plates was visible. I'm not trying to make an exact replica of a Stormtrooper. I'm just having fun making a doll that needed something to get my brain to put it in a category of type. Creativity, I got too many ideas. So I have problems sometimes figuring out which ones I want to do. So you'll see me jump around a lot. I don't take any real close measurements too often. It's mostly by eye, by feel. This looks like the way it should be. And I have no problem after I cut a part out, draping it over and double checking before I try to adhere it on. Making sure things fit properly is a lot better than trying to carve and sand after. With static figures, you can get away with that. But this is something posable. So you have to just give it that little extra space. It may not look 100% correct, but it also comes down to, will it move? Lots of patting and smoothing. And then those other little details. Now that arms and legs are done, the waist is done, we'll get the little armor pads for the back of the hands. Now here you're going to see where I've cut the fingers off that mitt. Now I do that so that when I put those fingers on, I need somewhere for it to rest. And because we fold that material over when we make the hands, it leaves a round back like a hinge. So when I cut the fingers off the mitt, I'll put a little groove in for that to rotate through. Eventually I'm going to have to do a video just on hand, feet, and balls. So when I do that, everything will be a lot clearer. But even without that groove, those fingers will still open and close on that half a mitt hand still. But the Stormtroopers always have that white little piece of plating on the back of their hands, so I had to make sure I put that on there too. And there's some bacon bond. Sometimes I just need a little dab, so I'll have a little squeeze on a place somewhere and I'll just use a toothpick to put it on. If you put too much on, it'll ooze out from underneath it. It dries clear. Like when it bakes, it will bake clear. It might have a little shine that can be scraped or sanded off, but for the most part, it bakes very clear. Then we'll set them aside and we'll get into something else. Cleaning, wiping, cleaning, wiping. You don't see me doing it as often as I do, but I do it an awful lot. Again, because I'm playing with white and switching over to black, you have to make sure you keep cleaning everything. With the upper torso all wrapped in foil, I can actually make the chest pad so it comes off and on the character. I love building accessories for them and soft goods, and let's face it, everything is cooler if you can take their gear off. Just putting a little couple ticks here and there so that when I'm cutting the shape out, I have some guide spots. I'll do the chest piece, and then I'll do the back piece. And when I join the two, I'll actually use some cloth tape. Hockey tape works good. Just fabric that's crazy glued on, it'll work good. When I use the hockey tape, I'll even use crazy glue and still glue it on the tacky spot. I'll use it to hinge things like the center part so that the chest can open and close. I'll also use it at the sides of the chest so that I can put little itty bitty magnets. Yes, I got some itty bitty magnets. They don't have a lot of strength for holding things, but for belts, clasps, or just securing some items up, they work pretty good. And I'll hide them folded in the tape. I know lots of the processes look fairly long, but I've chopped and sped them up to be as quick as possible. I don't want you to have to watch every little detail I do. But I also don't want to have people miss out on details they might have wanted to see. This is, after all, my very first tutorial video. So if there's any comments you want to make on how I've made it, or what is missing, or would I do too much, please leave a comment below, because I'm going to make more of them, and I'd rather have the input of people who like to watch them so that I can actually tailor make them a little better for my audience. If you'd like them shorter, longer, those are some of the things you could let me know about. Because I didn't want to have this too squished out. Again, you just see me, I'm basically just keeping the polymer clay warm with my hands and fingers. Just so I can keep getting it to roll over the shape I want without distorting the actual clay that I cut. I want these edges to stay pretty square, pretty flat, but have some thickness to them. Yep, I'm using the back end of my tool here. I do it a lot, especially when I just want something smoothed, because I want it very angular looking. Yeah, some of that's an actual hair that I was trying to get out of there. All that care, and I still managed to get a hair. Now on the back of the Stormtrooper outfit, there's always that little square boxy thing with the 0 and the 2 lines. Well, I wanted to make sure I had that too. It's the detail that tells you it's a Stormtrooper. But I'm not going to hyper detail about it. I just want to make sure that it's present on the figure. The brain will smooth everything out for you. When I'm making, I just push little dots, and then I just slowly connect the dots and smooth them out. I do the same thing when I'm adhering it onto pieces too. I just go around and I'll just dot. And then I slowly smoothen those dots out. And a lot of times I'll use one of the silicone tools afterwards to get it nice and smooth. Doing it this way, I can ensure I have a chest armor that is form-fitting to my figure. And because I don't build the figure, take it apart, string them up, take them apart, rewrap them, try to put more pieces, I do it all in a stage that I really don't see this doll fully completed with anything strung up to the very end when I actually start to string the doll for the first time. These are just some jigs I made for making my helmet and my pauldrons. The helmet I just wrapped with some black first, did a bake, They're just wooden beads with some tape. Yes, wood does not burn in your oven. The tape does not burn in my oven. Most of these things can actually take some pretty good heat, and they won't catch fire without a flame. I use the heat from my hand just to let it slowly wrap around. Again, I want to keep it fairly thick. This is going to be an actual floating pauldron on the side of her arm, so it has to have some thickness to it. More bacon bun. I'm constantly putting stuff back and forth. You see that piece of wood? Well, that's part of an old dresser with just some holes drilled in it so that they can hold these bars with my parts on them. I let the heat of my hand roll it down, and doing this actually thins out that material slightly. Let it cool, and I'll come back and I'll cut my pauldrons that are already cool. Making sure my edges stay square. Make sure they're the same length. I love this steel cutter. It has been a world changer for me. And there we go. 2 pauldrons. Ready to bake. Now, helmet's all cooled, so it's easy to trim a nice straight line. Because that bacon bund's been under there for a few minutes, that really does not want to lift off the head cap at all. It's almost as solid as it will be when it's baked. Now you're going to see the thickness difference from the piece I used earlier. This is that back part that stays a little raised. You can see that difference in height. That's how much thinner it got just forming it over. It lost half its thickness. So sometimes using stuff that's too thin might not work. Always testing and fitting, testing and fitting. Now, anytime I'm doing something like a helmet or a chest plate, there's always one side that's better than the other. And when that happens, I find I end up working the other side a lot. Don't forget to go back and work that perfect side too, because once you're working one side so much, it gets thinner. And you have to make sure that thinner carries over to the other side still. A few tools are handy, but you don't need a whole lot of them for this. But just trust the process. Sometimes when you're building things with polymer clay, they don't look like what you want right off the hop. It's that adding a little bit, gets you further and further to what you want to see. This helmet, this is actually the second attempt at building this helmet. The first attempt went horribly wrong because I tried to form it all out of the white, one shot, and tried to put the black in the eyes. It was a nightmare. Plus, this is a helmet I want to actually go off and on the character's head. Sometimes I'll build a helmet that is the head, and I just swap it out. Because the way I build the dolls, there's a neck peg, so I can just swap out a head that has a mask and put a head on that doesn't have a mask. But for this one, I wanted an actual helmet. So I actually had to make the helmet twice. This was the method I came up with. The first one didn't even look like a Stormtrooper helmet. More warming, and yes, my hands were already washed. It's a fresh one, so it takes a lot. But making out a snake is what I needed for that collar that goes around. Just keep rolling it till you get the thickness you want. The other end was too thin. That was what looked like an even length that was just that perfect size I needed. Again, that bacon bond around. And that tube, bam. Now I'm starting to see that Stormtrooper helmet. That gets me going, gets me excited. But I don't want to handle it too much because it'll absorb oils from my fingers. But I need it to join good and tight. So I'm using that little ... method. My padding is mostly to keep it warm and to help position it back up. It kept wanting to push off. This little thin snaky will give me that little something to squish to smooth out. Don't ever be in a hurry. You'd be surprised how fast time goes when you're doing this. You're thinking, oh, I only did this for 4 or 5 minutes, and you look up and it's an hour later. So don't worry about getting in a rush. Plus, I've taken many of these and then just wrap them with saran wrap and come back the next day. You can't tell because the light source is always constant. That mat lives on the end of my kitchen table. So you don't see that I've been in and out of this 7, 8, 9 times over the course of 10 days. In total, this whole build, the doll took me 43 hours to build. I had over 8 hours of video to be edited, which got edited down to an hour. So yeah, lots got chopped, lots got fast forwarded and sped up. And it's still not as comprehensive as I wanted. Now, this is the fun part. Everything's baked, all the pieces are ready. This is just some tube elastic from Walmart. Find it in the sewing section. I make a figure 8 and I sew the end. That gives me an even spot in the middle so I know how much elastic I have for each leg. When I'm stringing them, the elastic always stays, the right side elastic stays all on the right. The left side elastic stays all on the left. If you start tangling them when you start stringing them together, chaos ensues. I have a pair of these locking forceps, and I leave them on magnets so that they become magnetized. You could do it without them, but these locking forceps just let it lock in place so that you can actually use both hands without that elastic slipping back in on you, like that just happened. Stringing them back together is pretty easy. Bam! See? Mess already. So we won't do it on top of that. Never do that again. But there's not a huge loop that's left over there. And you want that open part of that loop to be in sync with that hole. There's that little bit of pin. It's the same kind of pin that I used when I was making the hands. I just cut them off with a pair of side cutters. And it's got to pass through this hole, through that loop in the elastic, and there's a hole on the other side. And that's the pin that keeps the elastic taut there. Now you'll see this pin ball here. It had a shoulder ball, like a peg that came off of it. That's actually just a piece of a stir stick that I cut short and stuffed into the hole that I drilled. That little peg coming out of that ball makes it so that I only use them in the thighs and the shoulders. And it makes it so when you go to move the leg or you move the arm, the whole thing rotates on that instead of trying to rotate in 2 spots. But because that stir stick is round, see, here's that pin, they take a little finagling to get in. See, it was because I didn't have that loop right. But with the loop in right, they pop in pretty quickly and pretty easily. If you find one side's looser than the other, That's easy enough too. Just keep working the elastic over a little more to the other side that's too tight, till both of them are about the same tautness. Pulling on the beads up and then working the other side. They'll stiffen up and even up, and then once the tension's equal, I find when I do the arms, I like to start, see there's that bead with the shoulder. The one hole's too tight, but if you want it to be there and be snug, that's a way to make it there snug. The other side has a hole that's a little bigger, so it lets it rotate. Putting the one arm side together first, I find is a lot easier. I can get the hand and the fingers and the pins in the fingers all the easier. Now, I did have a video go missing that had me build the face and her blaster and put together the pauldrons and actually drill the little holes that are in this hand that the elastic accepts. Because it ends up being a C shape. And the elastic goes between the two. And the pin goes in one hole, through the loop, and into another hole, just like the foot. Except there's a groove cut so that the elastic can come up in between them. But with the one arm already done, I can check its movement. See if it binds up anywhere, if I got to trim. But it looks like everything moves pretty good. Now, because the string or elastic comes down through the body, you want to make sure, you can see this on this one, the string and the elastic are towards the back. I made sure I needle threaded that elastic through on the side with all the space. You don't want to try and go between them. If you go between and get caught up in the string or the elastics between them, it will greatly hurt the tension that goes between the elastics on the arms and into the torso, because the one will bind up on the other. So if you can, make sure that you don't do that. But you can see the hand beads with the hand joint, they go together so much easier than the foot one do. On some dolls, especially bigger ones, I'll make it so they have posable toes. And it's the same thing. The foot is like the palm and the toes are like the fingers. Maybe I'll have to build another doll to show you that. But with the doll all completed, I can check out some of its movement, the tension between the elastics, the posability, and I like it when my dolls can stand and move on their own, that they can hold accessories on their own, because I play a little bit with stop motion, and I like doing that with my figures. But here we're going to put the chest plate and the pauldrons on. There's the head that I made. That's from that original skull. The eyes aren't painted. That's white polymer clay eyes with little blue irises. The only paint that this doll ever got was on the white fabric tape to seal it, because without the paint it'll become dirty looking because you touch it. The paint keeps it white like the rest of the polymer clay. It has some little magnets that clasp up the sides, and it actually stays pretty closed without it. The pauldrons actually hang on some of the fabric tape so that they move around with the arm. The belt, same type of deal, fabric tape, polymer clay little cases glued to it, and a pair of magnets for a belt buckle that's actually in one of those little cases. I like making sure my girls have some hair. And well, when I was thinking the hairstyle, she was getting space buns. There just wasn't any way around it. Not long hair, not braids, no updo, just space buns. But with the Stormtrooper helmet on, it's actually looking pretty close to a Stormtrooper. Especially with the blaster. Accessories. Well, thank you for checking out my build, everybody. And let's see what else we can bring to life.